Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we have one of the three kings. It's going to be Freddie King, and this is going to be coming from 1973, and he's going to be playing through Feeling Good, I Wanna Boogie. So let's get Freddie up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here for this breakdown because obviously we've got that change in dynamics that I always say. Great players and great bands, they always change the dynamics. But getting into Freddie's playing, I love the way that they have that call and response between the keys, that organ and the lead lines that Freddie throws down. It's such a great way to make it interesting to just have that call and response all the time, and it even happened later on with the lead lines as well. So great interaction throughout the whole band here. Obviously the band is super tight and absolutely on it. And the most important thing about this track, as the title suggests, just saying I want a boogie, you've got to have that energy in there, and absolutely nailing down the groove here, Freddie, with his playing, to the point where Freddie just wants to dance. You can tell that he's absolutely in that groove. And players like that, of course, you know, players like Freddie could absolutely sit in a groove with all the other band members as well that are just top-notch players all the way around. Another thing you'll notice, apart from the massive collar that he's got on his shirt as well, which is impressive, is the fact that he has his guitar over his right shoulder. So it means that all of his fretting positions with that left hand is going to be a bit more centralized to his body. Normally you'd have guitarists that actually put their head through the strap, and it means that it's over their left shoulder, and all of those third fret and second fret positions are now to the left of your body, whereas Freddie will now have it more centralized. And I think that's just the way that he plays. The other advantage that he would have doing this is that Freddie was a bit of a showman. As you can see, the way that he's dancing around, he also used to play with the guitar behind his head. Of course, if you've got that over the right shoulder, it means you can just pop it off your shoulder really quickly and get it up behind your head. If you do want to do a show-off maneuver or anything that you have got planned, it's going to be a lot easier to get that strap off your right shoulder rather than having to lift the whole guitar over your head. I suppose if you are playing behind your head, then it will naturally come off anyway if you have got it over your left shoulder. But sometimes players used to play behind their back, and certainly for that kind of maneuver, it would be a bit of a faff trying to get your head around and then move the guitar around and do all that kind of stuff. So sometimes it is just for the showing off element. I think in Freddie's case, he just got used to playing it that way. Another thing about this performance is the way that Freddie doesn't overplay. If anything, he's showing you exactly what you can do with the minimal amount of input in terms of numbers of notes per second. A lot of people get so preoccupied with speed and just playing fast for playing fast's sake. And Freddie, there's a little run that he goes through here where he's literally playing 3 notes. I mean, one of those is a stylized bend, but just the other 2 notes, he's just pedaling between those 2 notes, and that is it. And he's spending, you know, a good 5-10 seconds just on 2 and 3 notes. Of course, when you're playing so few notes, the expression becomes the most important element, because if you just play 2 or 3 notes in a row for a long time, that gets old very quickly. But Freddie's putting that expression in there, and you can draw that parallel with BB King, who did exactly the same thing, played very few notes, but he got that expression in there. And of course, we all know that it's the vibrato, or at least I think it is, that gives it that expression and that personality. Every great player has their own unique vibrato and their own unique expression. And it's interesting that when Freddie was actually trying to make it when he was younger, he was actually turned down by Chess Records, who were the big blues label at the time, for sounding too much like BB King. But it wasn't his guitar playing, it was his vocals that they said just sounded too much like BB. But let's get back into it. And there we have it, a very quick ending there. And one thing that I do want to mention quickly just about Freddie's technique with that right hand is the way that he manages to maintain that groove and the whole feel by just pedaling between that thumb and that first finger, which means that he can hit the root note of the chord, but then also just get that offbeat with the first finger. And it's something that he's throwing in throughout the whole performance here. And obviously he's doing that for his lead notes as well. He's just using thumb, and it's a really unique way of playing. Obviously it's going to give it a softer sound, but sometimes you'll see players who do palm that pick and then they play with their fingers that way, but Freddie just literally just does away with the pick. And we had quite a long drum solo there as well, and the great thing about that was the way they then got back into just the full instrumentation, just everyone absolutely on the ball when they come back in after that final drum fill. And Freddie was one of those guys that started early. He was only age 6 when his mother and his uncle started teaching him how to play, and when he was 15 his family moved to Chicago, and it was at that age that he started to sneak into nightclubs and listen to players, the great blues players like T-Bone Walker and Muddy Waters and also Howlin' Wolf. So he was getting that kind of exposure to these players, and no doubt looking at what they were doing, running home and trying to copy all these lines that he'd just heard at the clubs. And when he was 18 he was working at a steel mill, and he did music on the side as well. He was actually working as a sideman, which is basically like a session guy, so working with different bands but not necessarily sticking to one band and staying with them. And he also got married when he was 18, and him and his wife ended up having 7 children. And it was between this time of age 18 and 25 that he was working with various bands on the side, as well as working in the steel mill, but then going to these auditions for Chess Records for his own singing and playing. But that's, like I mentioned a second ago, he got rejected all the time for sounding too much vocally like B.B. King. And in 1959, when Freddie was 25, after all of these failed auditions, he then got to know Sonny Thompson, who was an A&R guy for King Records, and through that, he actually signed a deal that was with Federal Records, which was an affiliate label of King Records. So in 1960, he released Have You Ever Loved a Woman and You've Got to Love Her with a Feeling, and also at the same time that he recorded those 2 tracks, he recorded his instrumental called Hideaway. And this was important because when Hideaway was released, it reached number 5 in the R&B charts, but it reached number 29 in the pop charts. And at the time, 1960, this was unprecedented because he was a black artist and only white artists were really doing well on the pop charts. So to have a track that was so highly rated on that pop chart was really a breakthrough. And that contract with Federal Records lasted for 6 years. So in 1966, that contract had expired. And in 1967, Freddie started his first overseas tour. But of course, playing to all these people, he didn't actually now have a label. So he was effectively a free agent with all this music and all of this following. So whilst Freddie was on tour, King Curtis, who was a producer and a saxophonist, noticed that he was available and actually signed him in 1968. This would have been when Freddie was 34, and he signed him to Atlantic Records. And in 1969, Freddie hired a new manager called Jack Calms, and Jack got Freddie on the same bill as Led Zeppelin, and from that very show, he ended up signing a new deal with Shelter Records, which is a different record label, and that was set up by the rock pianist Leon Russell. And they very much treated Freddie like their top artist, and they took him full circle all the way back to Chess Records, who you remember rejected Freddie in the first place, but they ended up cutting Freddie's album at their recording studios and hired real top talent session musicians just to get the best sound they could for Freddie. Freddie was gigging with some of the big rock acts at the time. We had Eric Clapton in there, and also Grand Funk Railroad, who, if you don't know who those guys are, they're, well, Eric and Grand Funk are both on this channel if you want to check them out. But the most important thing was the crossover, because he was playing to generally all white audiences, which was a rare thing. We're talking about the 60s and the 70s here. So just achieving that in itself was a first. And also Freddie was one of the first guys to have white players in his band. So it helped that having a mixture on stage, it now wasn't a case of what your skin color was. It was now all about about the music. And in 1974, Freddie then signed with RSO Records, and unfortunately he just had 2 years with them, because in 1976, this is where Freddie became ill, and he was literally touring for about 300 nights of the year. So he very much didn't let up. He was always on the road, always playing, always performing. And some people did say, close friends of his, that rather than eat, he would have Bloody Mary cocktails, which is just a drink with just loads of stuff thrown in there. But it was just really through necessity, because he didn't have time to eat. He would have one of these cocktails that I guess would almost act like a meal replacement. Unfortunately, just that combination of partying a lot, but also being stressed out by the amount of gigs that he was performing, and that poor diet as well, ended up in him developing stomach ulcers. And in December of 1976, unfortunately, he died due to complications with that, and he also had acute pancreatitis. So again, he was only 42 at the time, so another one of those artists that was really taken early on. He did die at a very young age. But a legendary blues player, Freddie King, he was actually number 15, I think, in the all-time list on Rolling Stone magazine in terms of their top guitarists of all time. And he did make it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2012. So it took a little while, but at least he's in there. And such a great personality, obviously a great singer as well, let's not leave that out, but just in this performance he just absolutely exudes confidence, and it's just great to watch him, so entertaining. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!